Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day, everyone. I am Amiga Widya signing room as the presenter for my research-based analysis titled "The Negative Potential of Fictional Romanticized Abuse Consumption," an academic presentation based on academic editorial essay titled "The Impact of Abusive Romance Fiction." Let's open the discussion with: what kind of story do you enjoy reading the most? Well, because fiction is a great way to explore themes through narratives, and many have found some of the narratives as life changing. But does that also mean the morally defiant fiction could affect real world perception? In this less than 10 minutes presentations, the analysis challenges the notion whether or not that fiction is always separate from reality. First, let's get started with the logical sequence of these presentations. The methodology in this research is a qualitative analytical approach based on textual and discourse analysis to examine psychological and sociological studies on media influence. The research finding shows that fictional portrayals of abuse, manipulation, or coercion can shape real world beliefs when audiences consume them without critical awareness. It indicates that while fiction can be valuable for emotional exploration, it can also distort moral understanding when consumed uncritically, such as the normalization of abuse, incest, and sexual coercion in the romance media. The first argument is fiction and reality, whether or not they are connected, because although fiction is a product of imagination, it exerts a measurable influence on reality by shaping perceptions, attitude, and even behaviors. Real world events and emotions frequently inspire fictional creation, but fictional representation can in turn also influence audience belief and societal norms. The neuroscience evidence of this is that fiction influences how people think, feel, and interpret morality because study shows that reading vivid and emotional stories activate brain areas similar to real experience, meaning that fiction can shape perception as much as experiencing the real thing. While dark or mature fiction can be engaging, it requires critical awareness to separate imagination from moral approval. Here are some internet discussion snippets regarding of the arguments, and here is the most popular arguments. One of them is that whether or not the terrible media regulation causes damage to underage children. Because it is. Online communities often defend problematic content by reframing abusive relationships as romance. This problem is especially visible in some Japanese animated media where sexual portrayal of minors are normalized, also their relationship with adults. Neuroscience shows that minors whose prefrontal cortex is still developing, according to Casey, are more vulnerable to manipulation. In 2016 alone, reported by the US that 5,700 cases of child sexual abuse has happened. It is a proof that desensitization can have real consequences in real life. Even for the adult audiences, consuming too much media that portrays harmful relationships can lead to desensitization and confusion about what is acceptable in real life. Fiction often distorts morality by presenting abuse, manipulation, or control as symbols of love and passion, such as in the online spaces like book talk community. They popularize the genre of dark romance that includes explicit sexual contents or toxic dynamics that is actually a commercialization of sexuality in modern media that often reinforce unhealthy gender norms and exploitative relationships. The common counter-arguments of their defenders is that they argue that fiction is harmless because it is imaginary and should not be judged by moral standards. While many can separate fiction from reality, this view often accuses media and people that glorifies abuse or exploitation. Other claims such contents help them cope with trauma, yet research shows that repeated exposure to harmful narratives can instead normalize deviant behavior and reduce moral sensitivity. It is just an escapism. The refutation of this argument is that while fictional media has no real victim, it can still be harmful if the audience fail to separate fantasy from morality, justifying attraction to sexualized depiction of minors, incest, or sexual assault. Ignores how much portrayals normalize abuse and distort the idea of consent and love. Study shows that repeated exposure to sexualized violence can desensitize viewers and increase acceptance of harmful myths. Fiction can shape how people view relationship and morality. When abuse or manipulation is romanticized, it risks normalizing harmful behavior. Promoting media literacy, self-awareness, and responsible storytelling helps audience separate fantasy from real-life ethics. Healthy coping alternatives like mindfulness, journaling, and seeking supports allow safe emotional expression. Fiction should foster empathy, not confusion between love and abuse. Stay mindful, informed, and safe. So this is the summary, and thank you for listening to this presentation. This is the Q&A section. Let's discuss some questions if there is any. And with this statement, I close the presentation. Thank you, everyone.